Okay, so I think we've all had a lot of time this week. Well, probably a lot of great games out there. I know that my backlog is filling up more and more each and every day. It's a struggle to get through it. But I'd love to hear from you two guys. Jay, is there any particular game that you tried out this week that you want to chat about?
Well, I finally had my arm twisted enough to get in and try War Dust. A little background on
Yes.
me. I am not someone who plays a lot of military sims. I'm not someone who plays these big multiplayer 50 on 50, 20 on 20 kind of games. So War Dust not only felt janky and crazy VR wise, it also felt extremely foreign just as a type of game to play for myself. That being said, after everyone had talked about it before, I expected it to look much worse than it did. So when I jumped in, I mean, obviously the textures of like rocks were these like flat, open textures on the mountains and stuff. But like as far as immersion and jumping in and feeling like you're in a crazy war zone, it actually pulled me right into the game. Not I was struggling to get my gun reloaded. I was getting shot from all directions. I was trying to find cover where there was none. I was really impressed by the amount of immersion the game had. Uh, it's $25 though. That kind of surprised me. I mean, that's not cheap, but in the realm of VR games, that's kind of on the higher end still at this point. So for a $25 game, it pulled me in. It was immersive, but man, it was foreign and weird to play. You take the mag, so you hold your gun. If you're going to grab your gun off your belt, you use on an Oculus, you use the grip button to grab it. But then if you want to pull the mag out, you use the trigger to grab the mag, which on some level we kind of talked about. Like, it makes more sense. Like in real life, if you were pulling back your hammer or something, you'd probably be grabbing it with your thumb and your index finger. But to like switch up the model every VR game uses for how you grab stuff, that was the part I actually had the hardest time getting used to, was just the simple controls. To run, you have to aim your gun barrel at the ground. So like you hold your gun down. And yeah, I had no idea. They had to tell me because I had no idea how to run. Everybody was running. I would go back and forth between running because I didn't know what was happening. There, you do have to get past the jankiness and figure out the controls, and then you'll really start to enjoy the game. Though I really had a good time. I started getting more kills and feeling like I was actually contributing to my team. Although I think we didn't win a single match, did we?
No, I don't believe we
not
did.
One. We
I'd like to
played
think
like
that wasn't-
6.
Yeah, I would like to think that wasn't because of us, but I don't know. It started to feel pretty bad even when we tried switching teams, that our team always lost. And this is a team of 32 people. I mean, the three of us couldn't have drug it down that bad, but somehow we always managed to be on the losing side. So,
well, typically we were doing pretty positive. It was just, I don't know. Like whatever, there were just some guys on the enemy team, I guess, that like switched right when we did. That the entire time were kicking our team's AWS.
Yeah, we were failing miserably, even though it felt good. I felt like we were getting all these kills, and we were all like announcing to each other over the comms, this many down, and like I was like, man, we're doing so good, yet we just would lose every time. And it has this weird thing when you lose, it shows your team and the other team, and it says victory and defeat over each one. But like whatever team you're on, it shows a 0 as your like point value, I guess. So it makes you feel like you just didn't do anything right. I had a good time. I'm not into war games, and for someone who's not into war games to be able to get into that game and actually play with some friends, it was still a really enjoyable experience. So thank you for dragging me into War Dust and making me get shot a whole bunch.
And I actually really
Anytime.
enjoyed hearing about your experience, because the things about the game that you said were really janky are actually pretty normal for most of us that have played war games before, like the reloading and things like that. And that's the funniest thing. I suppose that there's a certain amount of, I'm going to say, game literacy with war games, that you just sort of get used to how you're supposed to move. You're supposed to run when you point the gun down, and getting used to the controls when you reload. And so it was really interesting hearing from you about a first timer, someone that's just barely breaking into this genre of games, and how they thought of it.
I'm so surprised that this is not something you've played before, seeing as if you like just go to like the Steam charts or just the Steam's like VR store page, like shooters take up most of the most popular section, I guess.
Well, I'm going to break the podcast here by saying this. I love VR. Shooters are the one thing that we have too many of. I think in VR, in gaming in general,
You're not wrong.
there's so much more that VR can do. It can it can change things. It can make you see things from a different perspective. That I think too many developers are still relying on the same old model of people loving shooter games. Shooters are great. They're great in VR, but there's got to be someone who takes this to a new medium. Beat Saber was one that did that. There's got to be more out there that we don't know yet that VR could just change and make amazing, and we haven't stepped into it yet.
But VR is just such a perfect fit for VR, and that's the problem. Like you caught
VR is
some
a
of this
perfect
in
fit for
the
VR.
Warzone. You don't get the experience of Call of Duty when you're trying to reload and you accidentally drop the magazine. Like, can you imagine doing that in Call of Duty? You hit reload and your guy just fumbles around on the ground for his magazine. But that's totally a thing that happens in VR shooters, and it feels incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Some people, I brought some people into VR to play shooters that do enjoy shooters, and they still didn't like VR shooters. And
Really?
unfortunately, yeah, but those are the kinds of people that mostly play like Overwatch or mostly play Call of Duty. It's when you're looking, sometimes you play these games truly for just the added experience of immersion. You're looking for, like, to me, the fact that I have to take the mag out and pick up a new mag, put it in, and cock the gun is a feature, and to other people it's an annoyance. So I can understand it, but I don't know. I agree, Adam. To VR shooters are a huge thing I was looking forward to when hopping into VR. I play a ton of shooters. I don't know how cringy this is going to be for some people, but I play a lot of airsoft in real life as well. So being able to hop into this, was that a head shake?
I don't know what it looked like on you, but I was trying to head shake.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's not cringy unless you try and tell me that because you do airsoft, you could be dropped into a battle zone and actually fight your way through it.
Yeah,
you tell me that,
I
I'm
never
gonna
claim
cringe.
that. No, airsofters play airsoft, and they.
And they should stay at airsoft.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, I like. Well, that's a whole other topic, but yeah. So I play airsoft for the fun of it, not to pretend I'm some military guy. That said, I still enjoy I love the mechanics of guns. I love the mechanics of, like, I like that in VR I can, like, lean around corners, and I feel like I can just do so much more that I can't in a video game. Airsoft does the same thing in real life, but now I get to do it from the comfort of my home.
You said something there that I really want to touch on as far as shooters go. You said you can do so much more in VR than you can do in a video game. And I think a problem that a lot of people who come to VR actually don't like the shooters is because they want what they could do in Call of Duty. And I'll tell you, in real life, I don't think there's any soldier that does a 360 no scope and kills someone. Like, Call of Duty is so far from realism, and I know this is alienating people who like Call of Duty. It's so far from anything real, and the way you would actually fight, that when you actually play a shooter, or even like Half-Life Alyx, you play a game like that, it suddenly makes you think about combat so much differently than you do in Call of Duty. You're not going to run into a room just gunning and thinking you're going to take stuff down. You actually have to think, where's the cover? How am I going to use it? Yeah, how am I going to fight strategically? And I think a lot of people who come to VR shooters are thinking they're going to run around and do flips and shoot people off in the distance. Like, this is much more like a real experience. And I think that's actually why a lot of people don't love them that loved shooters on consoles. It's not the same at all.
It almost needs to be its own genre. Yeah, like when you say console shooters versus VR shooters, they're basically two different genres. They're both, shooters, but they're so different from each other that they almost need to be their own separate category.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, the kinds of people that say play Arma might have a really good time with VR shooters. And maybe Battlefield. Maybe that's like the closest middle ground we can get. Which, by the way, Wardus is very much like. If you're looking for Battlefield in VR, that's what Wardus is for. I don't know if we introduced the game too much at the beginning because we talked about it last podcast. But just a quick overview, Wardust is, I think it's 32 versus 32 players. You have vehicles. It's mayhem. It's just like Conquest, if you're familiar with that game mode from the Battlefield series. Yeah, I think that more or less covers it.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
All right. I've got a game that I would like to talk about. You mentioned, okay, well, first off, the game's Mini Motor Racing X. But before I get too much into it, have you played it? You said something about it, like, is it the PlayStation VR game?
I looked and it was not in my PSVR. It had released on PSVR a little while back, but I had not gotten it. So thought I maybe had, but it's a totally different game I was thinking. I was thinking of this one where you like play with little cars on a track, and it was terrible. So no, your game looked much better from the trailer.
Gotcha. So yeah, so Mini Motor Racing it's kind of like Mario Kart in that you can except imagine Mario Kart, but if you wanted, you could also look at it from a bird's eye view and control your car as if it was an RC car. And you can do either. I guarantee you it's way more fun when you're playing as if it's Mario Kart. So but it plays very similarly. It's got like, you can play just standard racing mode where all you can pick up are boosts. It's got a X mode or whatever it's called where you can, like, I don't know, pick up power-ups and stuff. I didn't really care for that, so I only played around and went back to racing.
What's the
But
perspective? Because in the trailer I was a little confused. It looked like there was different perspectives. So what perspective do you drive from?
there's a lot of options. I drove truly first person. I used my Oculus. You can use controllers and stuff, but I kind of found it fun to use my Oculus Touch controllers to actually grab the steering wheel and move it around. And then you just press trigger, and like your two triggers are brake and acceleration. And so that's how I played it. But you can also do like traditional Mario Kart views where you're like either in front of it, or you're behind it, or you're even more behind it, and then there's like one even further than that. And then you've got a whole bunch of bird's eye options where not only can you look bird's eye, but you can look at the track from different perspectives around the map. So you can look at it from the south or the north or the east or low east or low north or whatever. So a lot of different viewing options. If I don't know, that's like your fetish. But if you're gonna play it right, okay, there's a bit of motion sickness. I will, even someone who's like pretty over motion sickness, there was a like playing in the front seat on this like super tiny map where you're just like drifting everywhere. I had a little bit of like, oh, playing my first time.
You said it's like
So
Mario
fun.
Kart. Is there weapons?
Yeah, it's that you can pick up those sort of things when you're playing that version of the game.
Oh, okay.
Or you can play a mode that's strictly just like racing. You can pick up boosts, but that's it. And cash, but that's like part of the game leveling system.
Okay, but the big question is, do you recommend it? Is this a buy, maybe if you have the
Yes.
money, or an absolute no?
Live, die. That we're doing stuff in the VR chat. If for those that were curious what I'm just talking about, check out the YouTube channel. You'll see what I'm talking about. So I recommend it. It's definitely a good in between if you don't want to get into something like, say, Project Cars, which is something we talked about last week, and you just want something that's really fun. It doesn't require a huge hurdle in terms of getting into the game and just being able to drive the darn cars. You don't need that much experience. It's like Mario Kart. Anyone can play it. It's probably a pretty good game to own in your library if you expect to be sharing your VR headset with people. It's super polished. There's a ton of maps. It's a really well-made game, actually. I would have liked some of the maps to be a little bit larger, perhaps, but still, like, they're small maps. You're constantly drifting because of how small the maps are. But it kind of, I don't know, it made things actually a little bit interesting that way. Play it, you'll see what I'm talking about. But yeah, I'd say it's an easy recommend. It also was I think it had a sale going on when I bought it. No, it didn't have a sale. It just had recently released, and that's why I got it. But I think it's worth its price because it's super polished. There's a lot of content to get through, and you can play with other people. Easy recommend
There's
from
a kicker.
Rip. Yes.
Didn't know it was multiplayer.
Yes, it is. It is co-op. It has multiplayer racing. Yeah, it's got a lot of options, actually. Thinking back on it.
All right.
Lots of stuff to do there.
Last week we had a horrible revelation, major
No,
disappointment. We found out
no,
about
no.
our person
Please.
here had never tried Google Earth.
I
Rip.
had not.
You better be ready to. I can't even think of the saying. I'm so mad. What is it? It's like eat your words or something. I don't even know. But you better tell us. You had to have tried this, right? You were supposed
Yes, I
to. It was
did.
your homework. So lay it on us.
Yeah, what'd you
All right.
think?
Okay. So not only did I play Google Earth, but I actually had we had I had the whole family try it out
Oh.
because I hopped in and immediately was like, okay, they got to see this. It's absolute. I see why like this is one of the games to like show to people that are new to VR. Oh wow, it's okay. First off, the low poly texture thing that you get when you're not like in Street View, that was still there, and I was based off how you guys were making it sound, I was hoping that that would be improved significantly, but no. If you go truly to like if you go into the streets of a city in the 3D mode, it's a little rough, I think. That said, some areas really gotta love it, a lot of love and attention, and holy cow, it's super cool. I wish there were more options in terms of like searching and filtering places. It's seeing like what is on the map, but it's super cool to see all these places and with family especially. My dad, when he was young, went on this big sort of world trip when he was like early 20s. And Colin, you don't know who Colin is. My my brother, my brother and I got to sort of sit back and relax and listen to my dad as he walked us through this journey he went through back in his 20s, and it was a pretty incredible experience. He showed us all these cities in South America that he went through. He took a ship to South Africa, his entire journey there. It was just incredible and absolutely something to show to others. They'll have a great time. It's so cool to see all these new places. I spent like 4 hours in Switzerland. just around, I think it's the Matterhorn is what it's
Yeah.
called. Yeah, I spent 4 hours there just cruising, like following the little like bike trails, and some places have way more attention than others. Like China, there's nothing, and then Switzerland had a ton of detail. So your mileage may vary based off where you go, especially like New York, and the US has a lot of really
Yes.
fleshed out areas as well. But yeah, you guys are right. It's incredible. It's a must-own. It's free. Just get it, guys.
How did your family do when you press the button? I think it's like the A button on the right hand, and it like flips your perspective. How did they do? Did that make
Oh,
anyone sick?
I was wondering if they would mention that because yeah, you're right. When you first do that, it's like, oh, there's a little bit of a stomach lurch. No, they didn't say anything, so I guess it's okay.
Yeah, for those of you who haven't done Google Earth, imagine you look at Google on your computer, you look at Street View. Imagine you've been sucked inside the computer and you can do everything on Google from inside, seeing it 360 around you. It is a truly amazing experience, and I think it's bigger and better, especially for people who have nostalgia, places they haven't been in a long time. Uh, that being said, really, Adam was the one who was like, who got these horrible facts out of Rip that he hadn't tried it. Adam, tell us a bit about what you feel about your long experience with Google Earth as someone who knew what to try when they did VR.
Yeah, so I have a really long history with Google Earth. So my father actually is in geography. He builds all of these different geographic information products. He's really big into maps. And so I had some pretty high expectations going into Google Earth when I first tried it. It still blew them all out of the water. And I know we chatted about this last week, but when I show people VR and everything it can do, there's two, maybe three experiences that I show people. And that's Beat Saber, Pavlov sometimes, and Google Earth VR. And Google Earth VR truly is the most incredible nostalgia trip you can possibly imagine. I played a lot of it this week because after chatting with Rip about it last week, I figured that I needed to go back and re-experience and recapture a lot of the magic of Google Earth, right? and it truly lives up to the expectation. Um, I
Where'd you go?
just I toured all the places. I lived in Japan, and it just brought back so many memories. Um, and then I went and toured the Vatican. The Vatican's one of the cooler places. If you get it, it's sort of weird in Google Earth VR, but if you can get it just right, there's a lot of 360 cameras within buildings that you can view.
Right.
And just seeing the history all over the world, one of the coolest experiences.
Mm-hmm. I love when you like go to one of those sorts of places and you discover that someone's got as they call it, connected photos, like connected 360 degree photos, so you get
Yes.
to actually tour a place. It's hard to explain, so I don't know if I really want to bother here, but like people take 360 photos and they connect, and then you can like really tour, and it's a special experience when you see that someone's done that for an area and you get to go through that.
Google Earth, try it, people.
Yeah, it's completely free. There's no reason not to.
This really isn't. All right.
Any more words of praise for Google Earth before we step in and off of the Earth and into space?
Not that I can think of.
No,
Sometimes
Jay,
I wish
what do you got
elevation
for us
was done
from
a bit
space?
better.
So I feel like I need to take a little bit of extra time to explain this because Echo VR is an Oculus exclusive, right?
Right.
Yep. So
Yes,
there's
it
a lot
is.
of you. There's some of you out there that may not have any access to this. You may not be able to play this. So Echo VR. This was my first time ever getting into it the other day. I got in with these guys luckily because you need someone to kind of teach you what the hell you're doing when you play it. Echo VR it's almost like an esports kind of not exactly soccer, but imagine if you had like a soccer arena where you floated around in space though, and instead of a ball you have a disc. You're trying to get to the other side against the opposing team and score a goal, but you're in 0G. You're completely floating around. You have little thrusters on your hands, and you can punch each other in the face, which was just the craziest thing ever. So first thing, you step into this game and it goes through this tutorial, which is really a really good tutorial for a VR game. It does a great job. It walks you through how you play, how you move, and everything. And you're super glad it does that because floating around in space is tricky and it is difficult. Learning to grab onto walls and push yourself. I mean, no one gets in and plays a great match their first time. I think even several matches, and I never played a great match. You go in and then you catch up with your friends and you're in this big lobby and you can actually go customize your character. You can play with guns. There's a lot to it. There's a lot of layers to this. I was surprised because for being something free, I thought this was going to be step into this little arena and throw your disc around stuff. I thought that was going to be it. It's definitely, you can tell it's tied to more. It's tied to Echo Battle and it's tied to all these other things. And there's more, there's a whole universe almost to this already. And I guess it's even got a big esports following, you were saying, Rip?
Wow.
Yeah, it's got I'd say it, Onward, and Pavlov are the biggest let's see if I can do it. There we go. Esports have the biggest esports communities.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that a VR game, even this new to VR, could actually have one, but I can see why, because this could be very competitive. So you get in, the discs
Super
in there.
polished.
Yeah, it's super polished. It looks gorgeous. You're trying to go, and something that I learned on accident. So when you're flying around, it does this really nice thing. It keeps you upright the whole time. You just have to float around and grab the disc. Well, you can actually turn these options off, and you can not only have all this room to float around space, you can turn sideways. You can tilt up and down. Like, I want to watch the pros play this now and see how crazy this looks to see them, because the freedom is completely limitless if you change these settings. I couldn't do it. I just ended up spinning in place. I had to turn all the settings back to safe and normal. But you're talking with your teammates, you're trying to strategize against this other team, you're trying to let them know, hey, the guy's coming up on you because he's going to punch you and take the disc away. It's like nothing I've actually played in VR before. I've played some VR games that are kind of like esports and stuff, but there's nothing quite like this. And I think that it really captures what VR can do because it actually feels like you're floating around in this room when you're playing it. You lose your sense of space. I kept almost falling over because I wasn't expecting there to be any real gravity. It's really cool. And if you have an Oculus device, it's free. So there's no reason to not try it. And one thing that really impressed me too, from what some other people said, it doesn't tend to make people motion sick. And
That's surprising.
Yeah, it's got this HUD that floats in front of you, which I know can be really helpful. But with how crazy the movement is, that most people say they haven't been able to get sick from it, they've done some sort of more black magic, as you spoke of, with this game. I don't know what they did, but I really think they knocked it out of the park with this one, and I was surprised how much fun I had, even sucking so terribly at it when I played.
Yeah, this is a game that I keep coming back to because it feels it truly feels what you hop in and you immediately know this is like it's a polished VR experience. There's a lot of stuff you can do. It's like Beat Saber in that it's going to be, I think, one of the classic VR games in that it's already got a decent sized community. It plays a lot like Ender's Game, if you're familiar with that series, where like if you know what I'm talking about, you're already there. I don't need to explain more. um yeah, it's super fun, and I keep coming back to it. It's not as much as some other VR games perhaps, but it's a wonderfully approachable game that allows you to still play a multiplayer VR experience, because most of those are, as you were talking about earlier, most of those are confined to the shooter genre. This is, I think, the one of the best games you can play multiplayer, if not the best game you can play multiplayer, that doesn't strap you to a gun. Unless you're playing the combat arena, in which case you are strapped to a gun, quite literally.
Yeah. And
Have you
being an
played it,
Oculus
Adam?
exclusive, yeah.
I have not played it yet. So it is a Oculus exclusive, and I only have an HTC Vive. There are ways of getting it on Vive, but
Yes, there are. Mm-hmm.
but I have not taken the time yet to play it. Maybe I'll try that out this next week.
Nice. If you do, let us know. We'll get in there with you. It'll be fun. It's definitely best
looking
with
forward to it.
friends the first time, because the people in the lobby, some of them, I mean, I was only in one lobby, but there was definitely at least one or two that were just already toxic and annoying. I wouldn't have wanted to play with them. So go with
Just like
friends.
any other esports game.
Yeah, what a surprise, right?
And I'm really excited to see how esports explodes in VR. And this sounds like it's an incredible game. I followed some of the Pavlov esports for a while, and it's really exciting and fun. But one problem I think that exists with sort of VR esports is that it's hard to watch sometimes. I don't know if you've ever tried to look up on YouTube from someone's perspective in VR, but it's sometimes kind of hard to watch just because,
Like nauseating?
Huh?
Like nauseating, hard to watch?
I wouldn't say nauseating, just disorienting a little bit. Watching someone's view going side to side and up and down all the time. It's a very natural sort of movement. It's how someone would look in real life, but it's not something that you typically expect from watching someone play a video game. And I imagine that maybe that feeling might be a little bit worse in 0G, and like you were talking about, maybe when a pro plays it, they're flipping all over the place, they're going up and down like crazy. I can't even imagine what that would be like to watch.
It needs some camera smoothing or something for the perspective to help, because if you don't have that, the problem with VR, so for those of you out there who don't know this, when you're watching a VR video, if you have never played, you're only seeing a very small fraction of what someone's seeing. You're seeing a small itty bitty bit of it. And they're also able to still move their eyes inside. So you're not getting the experience they are. You're seeing a small square of what they see, and their head's moving fast. So like you've said, it's extremely disorienting to watch, and it's nothing like what playing the game is like. That's still a big hurdle for VR, for esports and VR and everything.
Mm-hmm.
That almost is the motto of VR at this point. It's you won't understand it until you try it.
We should have it like as the tagline for the podcast.
Yes.
You don't know if you'll like this podcast till you try it.
But that's one of the great things. It's hard to explain to someone, but once they get into it, it's fully immersive, and it truly is amazing. And that maybe brings us kind of into our next opinion section, where it is so immersive that people can sometimes lose themselves in it, and then interestingly dangerous things can happen.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Excellent.
Disclaimer.
Excellent segue.
Disclaimer, only one person that we know of has died in VR, so it's not so risky that you could lose your life. Just you might cut a knuckle or punch someone you love in the face, like nothing major.